We're on page 186. מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שחסרת בנשמתי וחמלה. מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שחסרת בנשמתי וחמלה. רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך. ירי לי 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 לי, ירי לי 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 לי, ירי לי 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 לי, ירי לי 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 לי, ירי לי לי לי, ירי לי 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 לי. רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך, רבה אמונתך. I offer thanks to you, ever-living sovereign, that you have restored my soul to me in mercy. How great is your trust. Every morning we remind ourselves that our souls are a gift, that our lives are a gift to be taken, and that we have God's trust to become the best version of ourselves. When we say, Rava emunatecha, we say, we know that you have faith on us. And with that faith, we try to connect with our best selves. It's not defined in any book. Nobody knows what's the meaning for each of us. Boker Tov. Nobody knows what's the meaning for each of us. What's the path for each of us to become the best version of ourselves. We have mitzvot, we have structures, we have values that help us become seekers of who we are meant to be. As we enter this space that we create together, we turn our Sidurim to page 192, as we acknowledge not only the sacred community that surrounds all of us, but also the one that we create by being intentionally present in this place. Matubu, יעקב, משכנותיך, ישראל. ונברוב חסדך וביתך, אשתחווה לך על קודשך ויראתך. אדוני אהבתי מאום ביתך, ומקום משכן כבודך. בני אשתחווה בכרה, אברך לפני אדוני עושי, בני תפילתי לך. אדוני את רצון, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, ענני באמת אישך. Then our Siddur to page 194, and you might want to follow along with the words of our Siddur, the words of our tradition, and you might want to take a moment to silently acknowledge your own body, to think about the well functioning of your body. Our bodies are sacred vessels, the containers of our souls. And we acknowledge, we recognize that they need sacred devotion. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו, רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh, working wondrously. We turn our Siddur to page 196 for the blessing for our souls. Elohai Neshama.
Elohai Neshama shenatata mi tehorai. Elohai Neshama shenatata mi tehorai. Elohai Neshama shenatata mi
שנתת בי טהוראי. אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהוראי. אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי נשמה שנתת בי טהורה, טהורה. Source of all creation, sovereign of all souls, praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch אתה אדוני, אשר בידו נפש כל חי, ורוח כל בשר איש. We turn our Siddur to page 198 as we prepare to recite Birkot HaShachar, the blessings for the daily miracles. We take a moment to acknowledge the little things that we have in our routines that we take for granted, that we don't stop often to think about them, the functions that our bodies can perform, the liberties that sometimes feel or seem to be granted in our world, and the fact that who we are. We're on page 198, Birkot HaShachar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has given the mind the ability to distinguish day from night.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who opens the eyes of the blind.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who frees the captive.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who lifts up the fallen.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who stretches the earth over the water.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who strengthens our steps. steps.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who clothes the naked.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives strength to the weary. And I invite you to think about all the things that we sometimes feel we have no energy for them. I invite you to think about the burnout that many of us experience in the different interactions and situations in our lives. The burnout that many of us are carrying as a result of this pandemic. As we start our morning, we try to look at those things with perspective. We try to see beyond our challenges. And from that place, from that ability to see beyond, to find the strength to move forward. We're on page 200, the bottom of page 200. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who removes sleep from the eyes, slumber from the eyelids. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who created me in the image of God.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me free.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me a Jew.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, עוזר ישראל בגבורה.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Israel with splendor. ברוך אתה ה' אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו, וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with the words of Torah. O Adonai, our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל.
These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, where the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all.
We're on page 212 for the blessing for the Psukei de Simra.
Baruch Shema ve'olam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Oseh Bereshit, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, Baruch Gozer umekayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov lereav, Baruch chai la'ad mekayem lanetzach, Baruch bodeh u'ma'atzir, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo,
with songs of praise we extol you and proclaim your sovereignty, for you are the source of life in the universe. One God, life of the universe, praise and glorious ruler. Your name is eternal. Melech me'ulal בתשבחות, מלך מהולל בתשבחות. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל בתשבחות. תשבחות. מזמור שיר. We're on page 214, Psalm 92. We start the Psukei de Simbra in Shabbat, gifting Shabbat with a wonderful song. מזמור שיר ליום השבת. מזמור שיר, מזמור שיר ליום השבת. טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות לאדוני ולשמח לשמך עליון.
טוב להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות
לאדוני לשמח לשמך עליון. לילה להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך ואמונתך בלילות. להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך ואמונתך בלילות. להודות לאדוני, טוב להודות לאדוני לשמח לשמך עליון. טוב להודות לאדוני, להודות לאדוני ולשמח לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך אמונתך בלילות. להגיד בבוקר, בבוקר חסדיך אמונתך בלילות. We're at the top of page 215. Happy are those who do it in your house. Happy are those seekers of joy within their hearts. אשרי יושבי ביתך, הללויה סלע. 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 תהילת לדוד, רוממך אלוהי המלך, בהברכה שמך לעולם ועד.
בכל יום אברכך והללה שמך לעולם ועד.
דור לדור ישבח מעשיך, בגבורתך יגידו.
חנק כבודך ותדיך ונדיך, ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך.
בעזוז נורתך יאמרו, בגדולתך אספרנה.
זכר ברב טובך יביעו, וצדקתך ירננו.
חנון ברחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחם על כל מעשיו.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, בחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, גבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו, וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, ומשולתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, בסוקף לכל הכפופים. Wait a second everyone. When you read this verse here, סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, for those that are falling, for those that are experiencing hardship, and lift up those that are bended. So we think about the work that God does through us. We don't pray to a God that will save those that are experiencing hardship somewhere else. We are reminding ourselves that the work that God does for those that are in need comes through the work of our hands. That's what you're going to say in a few more moments. Poteach et yadecha. God opens our hands. So choose where you want to focus your energies, what you want to give for, how you want to contribute to the many hardships that we are seeing in the world. And let's remind ourselves that when we contribute, when we become partners in healing this broken world, we are doing God's work. עיני כל אליך ישברו ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעיתו פותח את ידיך ומשביע לכל חי רצון צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו וחסיד בכל מעשיו
קרוב אדוני לכל קוראיו לכל אשר יקראוהו באמת
רצון ירב יעשה בית שבתם ישמע ויושיעם
שומר אדוני את כל אוהביו ואת כל הרשעים ישמיד
תהילת אדוני ידבר פיי ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם בהווה ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם Hallelujah. We're on page 218, Psalm 150. Hallelujah. 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 Master of all generations, who is praised in a multitude of praises, who guides the world with abundant loving kindness, and all creatures with mercy. Adonai neither slumbers nor sleeps. God awakens the sleeping, arouses those who slumber, gives speech to the mute, to those that are not given the right to speak. And God loosens the bonds of captives. God supports the fallen and strengthens those who are bent over. You alone do we acknowledge. Even if our mouths were full of song as the sea, we could never find the right words to express the depths of our gratitude. We're on page 220, Ilufino. Ilufino, Maleshira Kaya.
Shama
מספיקים להודות לך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו. אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך. Call on our mothers now. אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אמותינו. Page 222. האל בתעצומות עושיך, הגדול בכבוד שמך. שוכן עד מרום בקדוש שמו, בכתוב ראינו צדיקים באדוני. לישרים נבע תהילה, בפי ישרים תתהלל. ובדברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש. ובמקהלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל, ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו, בכל דור ודור. ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ. כי לך נאה, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, שנשבח הלל ושמרה, עוז ממשלה נצח גדולה וגבורה, תהילה ותפארת קדושה ומלכות, ברכות בהודעות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי שמרה, מלך אלכי העולמים. חצי קדיש פייג' 224.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה,
אמן.
בעלמא דיווח חירותי וימליך מלכותי.
בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי בכל בית ישראל. בגלה ובזמן קריב
ואמרו
אמן.
יש מרבם מבורך לעולם עולם מעל מיה.
יתברך
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהודר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשם
בריחו
לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה.
תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן ועלמה ואמור אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things.
המאיר לארץ ולעדרים, עליה ברחמים. המאיר
לארץ ולעדרים, עליה ברחמים. ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. ברבו ובשמחה מעשיך אדוני כולם, בחוכמה עשית, מלוא הארץ, קנייניך, קנייניך, אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו ממנה לאורו. אדוני אלוהינו, חמלה גדולה ויתרה, חמלת עלינו. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai, our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. הרננו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך. Lighten our eyes with your Torah. Focus our minds on your mitzvot. Unite our hearts in reverence and love. We are at the bottom of page 130. Gather us in peace from the four corners of the earth and lead us upright to our land. For you, O God, were wonders. You chose us, truly you drew us near to your great name, that we might acknowledge you, declaring you one in love. Baruch atah Adonai, Ocher ve'amo Israel, be'ahava. Turn our Sidurim to page 232 for the Shema, as we ask to become one with God, as we ask to deeply connect with our souls. Recite the Shema. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We continue on 236. Adonai said to Moses as follows: Speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the fringes at each corner. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of Adonai and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת, אמת, ויציבהו בחביבנו רב אדיר בטוב ביפה, ועשה עלינו לעולם בהת. We continue with silent reading over page 238. תהילות לאל עליון, ברוך הוא ומבורך, משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לשמך לך אנו שירה, בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם, page 240, מי כמוך בעלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, לי 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 לי, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, לא נורא תהילות אוסף אליהם, נורא תהילות אוסף אליהם, שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים, אוי לשמך על שפת הים, שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם. בארץ כל ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל, לדומך יהודה וישראל, היי גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. יאללה 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 יאללה, ברוך אתה אדוני גואל ישראל. We turn our Sidurim to page 242, and we also turn to Jerusalem, the city of peace, the city of Shalom, as we seek to find our internal peace, the prayer of our heart. We seek to be attentive to our souls, and to find wholeness within our hearts. Adonai, שפתי תפתח, ופי יגיד תהילתך. Oh Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו, אלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון גומר חסדים טובים בקונה הכל, וסוחר חסידי אבות ואימהות, ומגיע גאולה לבניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך חוסן ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחלחל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, מן אמנת לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה המתים.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקדש זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו, אדיר שמך בכל הארץ, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. אחד אלוהינו ואבינו מלכנו ומושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור. הללויה.
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, בשפחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש, ישמחו מלכותך שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג מקדשי בי. Muy bien, las tenemos. Sí. יהיו לרצון אמרי פי, בהגיון ליבי לפניך, אדוני, צורי וגואלי. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. We are at the bottom of page 260.
שלום במרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל,
יושבי תבל, ואמרו, אמרו, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו, אמרו, אמן. היי, ליי 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 עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואמרו, אמרו, אמן. ואמרו, אמרו, amen. We will now turn our Siddurim to page 362 in order to start the Torah service, and we would like to invite two Torah carriers because today we are in one of these very special Torah portions that lead us all the way to Passover. So we'll take two Torahs from the Ark, and I want to remind all the Torah holders that we don't take the Torahs before we say Ki Mitzion. So page 362, please rise as we have opened the Ark. En kamocha Elohim Adonai, ואין כמעשיך, מלכותך מלכות כל העולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, ההמלוך
לעולם ועד, אדוני עוז למוהיתם,
אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים.
ברוך
שנתן
ברוך
שנתן תורה, ועמו ישראל בקדושתו.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
אחד אלוהינו, גדול אדוננו, קדוש שמו.
אחד אלוהינו, גדול אדוננו, קדוש שמו. גדלו לאדוני איתי, ונרוממה שמו יחדיו. ליי ליי ליי, ליי 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 ליי, ליי 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 ליי, מזמור לדוד, הבו לאדוני בנהלים. מזמור לדוד, הבו לאדוני כבוד. Adonai, Avol Adonai kevod shemo, Avol Adonai kavod ba'oz, Avol Adonai kevod shemo. Ay, 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 Adonaios lemohitem, Adonai yevarech et amo shalom. Adonaios lemohitem, Adonai yevarech et amo shalom. You may be seated. That was an impressive bass, even. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, it's good to see all of those that are joining us in Zoom. It's beautiful to see your faces. And Zach, may I ask you to, in one more moment, to put the file I send you, but not yet. Yesterday we spoke about Parashat Shmini, and there are two big topics in Parashat Shmini. One, maybe three. One is the beginning of the work of the Kohanim. The priests, they were consecrating the tabernacle. The tabernacle was built, then for 7 days were focused on consecrating the tabernacle, and on the 8th day, they come out, and they are finally engaged in doing the work of serving the Mishkan, the tabernacle. There's some role modeling that comes from Aaron, Kohen HaGadol, and Moshe. They are brothers, they are siblings. And it goes very well. There's a description of a beautiful ceremony. Nadav and Abihu, they were observing them as well, and they imitate, you could say, what their dad and uncle were doing. And that doesn't go that well. And we spoke about the different interpretations around why it didn't go well. And that our commentators pretty much divide in two groups. Those that say that they were driven by wrong motivations, and those that say that they elevated themselves to such a high level that they reach an extension, a place in which the human body couldn't survive. And we spoke about that in the context of mystical thinking. And there's something that I didn't mention yesterday intentionally, because I thought it was going too far. But there is in the Mishnah, and later on in the Talmud, a very famous story, the story of the four that enter the Pardes, that somehow speaks about this same situation of entering a place that you are not, that while you have the ability to enter that place, you don't have the ability to survive in that place. And the only one who has the ability to survive in that place and to come out the same way he came in is Rabbi Akiva. And what we learn about Rabbi Akiva from the four that entered the Pardes, there were four rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Ben Soma, Ben Asai, and Elisha ben Abuya. Four rabbis. And to each of them happen different things. One gets hurt, the other one dies, the other one kind of Kotetz Manetivot is written. It's like he lives a Jewish tradition and becomes something else. That's why later on he's called Acher, the different one. And only about Rabbi Akiva, we read that Unichnas LeShalom, toward peace, and came out in peace. So the thing that we learn about Rabbi Akiva is that he was the only one with the right level of preparation. all this to say that immediately after that, the Torah starts speaking about limitations, boundaries. And when we think about boundaries in the context of Jewish tradition, one of the main topics is kashrut. The topic that comes immediately after this situation is kashrut. And I don't think that the reason for kashrut being after the situation is, as many commentators say, well, a mere coincidence. Like, no way. No way. I think that there's a very interesting sequence, and I want to point that out to you, and then we're going to read some stuff about kashrut, but we'll study together a little bit. Commentators point out to the fact there are always different commentaries in our tradition. This is a less popular path, but it's right there, and I think it's an important one. They point out to the fact that those that got terribly hurt are the children of the most important leader, of the Kohen HaGadol. And what Torah might be trying to say is that we're all humans, and if we don't understand and we don't acknowledge our limitations and our need to learn, and it doesn't matter who is your father or your mother, we all can get hurt. Even great leaders should be limited or need to be limited in their power or in the use of their power. Now, Daphne, going back to our conversation a couple of years ago when you were working on this in this pasuk from Bereshit. You remember we were younger. I barely recall it, but I do remember. A part of our conversation was about the responsibility that human beings have over managing the earth. And if we use excessive power when we are managing this earth, we might create a situation in which this earth is not a place in which we can live. I think these two things come together so wonderfully in this Torah portion. Not only the height above, but also what happens in earth. And then we go to a terrenal conversation about kosher eating. So from that place to kosher eating. So Zaki, can you put the file I sent you? I take that as a yes. No, they left. Zach, are you there? Milo, can you? Oh, Zach is not there? I need you to put the file that I sent you this morning to the streaming email. Are you working on that? I can't hear you, Milo. Excuse me? Kosher one, yes. The one that says Shmini Kosher. The only one I sent you this week. We are almost there. But you want to put that in the thing. So let me start by reading you. Listen to me while Milo is working on that. You listen to me and I will read slowly. Okay, we'll start as slowly. Zach is there. Okay, Vayikra 11:44-47, all the kosher laws. Okay, Zaki, can you take care of that? Thank you. Look at me, everybody. Look at me. Forget the screen for a couple of minutes. So the 11th chapter of the book of Leviticus starts with all the kosher rules. If you also are looking at the screen that doesn't have the stuff and also making noise at the same time, it becomes almost an impossible task for me. So please help me out. Be with me. I have also a bunch of people connecting in Zoom that they deserve my attention. Like, I can't divide in three. Please help me. We all need to acknowledge our limitations. More than three I cannot do at the same time. My wife would say that no more than one. Is that correct? Depends on the day. Okay, so, for I am holy, for I am Adonai your God. Make yourselves holy, and be holy, for I am holy. And do not defile yourself with any manner of swarming thing that moves upon the earth, for I am the eternal that brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the beast and the fall and of every living creature that moves in the waters, and of every creature that swarms on the earth, to make, and this is the most important part, to make a division between the tameh, the impure, and the ta'or, the pure, and between the living thing that might be eaten, and the living thing that might not be eaten. Now, when the Torah is summarizing the 11th chapter of the book of Leviticus, I think it gives us the most important idea. It's about making a distinction between the ta'or and the tameh, between the pure and the impure. And now, you have the text? Not yet. Okay. Once you have the text, I will invite you to read with me. Rashi says, for I am the eternal your God, just as I am holy, for I am the eternal your God, so too you must make yourselves holy. And the word there is below, down there. So we were speaking about up there with Nadav and Abihu, and summarizing down there, you got to find a way for holiness without trying to elevate yourself to heaven, here in earth, when you interact with nature, when you interact with fellow human beings. Oh, that's fantastic news. Thank you, Milo and Zach. Okay, so I need to go all the way to Moreh Nebuchim. Now, I need to tell you something. Yeah, to the English of Moreh Nebuchim. So I need to tell you something. Rambam is one of my favorite thinkers for two reasons. Sometimes because I completely agree with him, and sometimes because I think that he's totally wrong. You tell me in a moment which one I think is this one. Can you read, Mitch? Guy for the perplex?
I maintain that the food which is forbidden by the law is unwholesome. There's nothing among the forbidden kinds of food.
Mitch? Well, we are almost done. We are starting a very slow Shabbat today, and we need a bit
Here
more
we go.
timing.
Woo. Okay.
And take this one, make sure it's working. Come on. Okay, good. Yalla.
I maintain that the food which is forbidden by the law is unwholesome. There's nothing among the forbidden kinds of food whose injurious characters is doubted except pork and fat, but also in these cases the doubt is not justified, for pork contains more moisture than necessary for human food and too much a superfluous matter. The principal reason why the law forbids swine's flesh is to be found in the circumstance that its habits and its food are very dirty and loathsome. It has already been pointed out how emphatically the law enjoins the removal of the sight of loathsome objects, even in the field and in the camp. How much more objectionable is such a sight in towns? But if it were allowed to eat swine's flesh, the streets and houses would be more dirty than any cesspool, as may be seen at present in the country of the Franks. A saying of our sages declares, "The mouth of a swine is as dirty as dung itself."
Okay, he's trying to make a point here, right? That microphone might be a bit too high, Zaki. Okay, what's the Rambam trying to say? And if you want to share, we have a microphone, and I would like to ask you to unmute people in Zoom so they can participate, but also to have the ability to mute them because not necessarily they hear us, and so if we want to continue with the conversation, we want to have control over that. So what's the Rambam talking about? What?
Health.
Health.
Because it's a
So,
dirty food animal.
yeah, so he's going into a very classic argument. He's saying, well, very simply, we are giving these kosher laws because otherwise we would be very unhealthy. He's a doctor. He's an MD besides being a rabbi. And he's trying to play an argument that seems to be very concrete and rational. There is a problem with that argument. What's the problem with that argument? Is that it's simply not true. Like, it's just wrong. Because we know that, at the contemporary, later, to Ramban, Nachmanides will say, people are eating, other things and things that we define as no kosher, and they're not dying. So how are you going to deal with that? And yes, every a few months, someone shows up and says, well, there is a proof now, a scientific proof that if you mix dairy and meat, you die earlier, whatever. That's not the reason for us to eat kosher. The rabbis in the Talmud have a very interesting conversation. I didn't bring it here. That one of the rabbis says, well, eating pork is horrible. And the other rabbi says, how do you know? And then, I don't know, says the other rabbi. They go back and forth. And then the second rabbi says, I know, I have been close to where other peoples are, and I have smelled pork, and it smells terrific. Doesn't smell that bad, he says. So, but we don't refrain from eating pork because it's horrible. We refrain from eating pork because we eat kosher. So the question, if pork is not horrible and kosher is not necessarily healthier, it could be, and there are all kinds of ideas, and people think that there are certain practices that are more clean or were cleaner than the practices that existed at the time. What's the reason to actually keep kosher? And let's make a clear distinction that, one more second, that for a very long time, liberal Jews said, or many liberal Jews said, well, we don't have to follow kosher laws. And I also want to say, I think they got them wrong. I think that they got it completely wrong. But I also think that the Ramban got it wrong. So what can be right about kosher? Let's keep going down. And by the way, let's see what the clear card says. Who wants to read? Well, you have a microphone already. If you want to be a reader, just point out with your hand and I will bring you a microphone. Go.
The reason for the laws of kashrut is not for physical health benefits, as the Rambam explains. We see that non-Jews eat non-kosher foods and are healthy. Rather, their purpose is for well-being of the soul. Non-kosher foods remove the spirit of purity and holiness and create a blockage in the intelligence and cause cruelty. This only helps them, Israel, for they will live in the world to come. But for non-Jews, there's no purpose in this mitzvot. Oh.
I was about to erase that last sentence. I was saying, no, let's deal with the entire thing. let's deal with that. So the clear card, 16th century Amsterdam and Poland. The clear card says, well, it's not really about health. And he brings a very important argument. He says, when you don't eat kosher, when you don't have some, let's put aside the word kosher for one moment. When you don't have some mindfulness attached to your daily habits, then you lose awareness of how you interact with the environment. That's the mental blockage he's speaking about. Now, if you have no awareness, according to his idea, then he said, well, you're not going to get it to the world to come, and you're only going to make it to the world to come, once again, according to his idea, if you're a Jew, so that's why only the Jews will need to be preoccupied with that. So, setting that aside, let's just make this clear. He's not a liberal or a universalist. Like, clearly, he's not. He's making a very clear distinction between Jews and non-Jews there. He's not a universalist, but he's saying, no, there's something in the action of eating kosher, of having some modality, that puts your mind into something. Now, I want to read, this is a bit long, but I really want to read this open later. There's a book written by David Hartman, The Rooms of the Heart, in which he addresses different, a heart with many rooms is called, a heart of many rooms, in which he addresses different sramim, different streams in Jewish tradition, and he speaks to the different Jewish identities about different topics, and speak about important thinkers. This is the open letter to the Reformed rabbi. Who wants to be our reader? You go? Okay.
Framing of the conversation, part 2. Jesus of Nazareth is reported to have said, "It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is rather what comes out of the mouth." We talked about that last week, actually.
Uh-huh.
In referring to what goes into the mouth, he was speaking not of the dietary laws of the Bible, but rather the Pharisaic requirement to wash the hands before eating. There's no reason to doubt that Jesus observed the biblical food restrictions, and there's no reason to think that he called for their abrogation. But the new church soon had more Gentiles than Jewish adherents, and it rapidly adjusted to the situation. The Apostle Peter was said to have been shown in a vision that the impure animals were no longer forbidden. At a historic gathering, it was decided that Gentile converts to Christianity need refrain only from the meat of idolatrous sacrifices, from blood, and from animals that had been strangled. In later centuries, Christian critics of Judaism vehemently attacked the dietary laws, with the result that Jewish resistance stiffened. Many Christians resented the unwillingness of Jews to eat in Christian...
We need to go down, guys. So just let me frame something about this argument that Hartman is making. He's talking about the beginning of Christianity and how the new church thought about kashrut, kosher eating, and then he's bringing it to the context of Reform Judaism. Why? Reform Judaism or progressive Judaism as a movement is born in Europe in conversation with Christianity. And Jews were many times, as we know, during the Middle Age, the medieval times, in very complicated situations with fellow human beings that happen to be Christians. And now he's framing that to say, well, obviously, because of this kind of conversation, Reformed Judaism was thinking, when it was born, about how to blend into society and how to be less noticed. And then
the desire to break down such barriers was one of the considerations that led to the founders of Reform movement to rethink the question of dietary observance. The issue was raised in Reformed Jewish circles in the 1840s, if not earlier, and was under discussion for some decades. In 1885, a group of distinguished Reform rabbis adopted the famous Pittsburgh Platform. It contained the statement, "We hold that such Mosaic and rabbinic laws as regulate diet, priestly purity, and dress originated in ages under the influence of ideas entirely far into our present mental and spiritual state. They fail to impress the modern Jew with the spirit of priestly holiness. Their observance in our days is apt to obstruct rather than further to modern spiritual elevation." However, Isaac M. Wise, the chief organizer of the movement in America, and publicly advocated the retention of these laws for hygienic reasons and urged that they not be made subject of controversy and bitterness.
Let me stop you for 1 second. Now, what Harman is saying is that, and which is true, that Pittsburgh platform says, well, we don't really feel that there is a need for this, and that Wise, the founder of the Reform movement, I need not help me out 1 second. Let's have one conversation. So, and Isaac Wise, he says, well, we actually need to keep kosher, but the reasoning that he uses is actually a Rambamic one. It's hygiene. He says it's healthier. Is the reason that you would think that actually a liberal Jew, from a scientific perspective, would say today, well, that's questionable. Not sure. It's a bit problematic to hold to that onto that position. Can we go down? More than. Low. We're going to skip this. Skip. Okay. Now, this brings another question. So if kosher eating is about finding purity versus impurity, it's about finding holiness. And there is an argument that says that that holiness has to do with taking care of our bodies and has nothing to do with the soul. That could be a track. Then kosher eating not necessarily is so relevant. Because you say, well, not necessarily healthier, not necessarily better. It's a mitzvah, so I don't ask, I just fulfill mitzvah. The question is there really a meaning to kosher eating beyond hygiene or beyond health? I think there is. And I want to share, this is attributed to Rabbi Salman. I actually must admit that I found this in several places in internet, but in my books, or the books I have from Rabbi Salman, I couldn't find this. But I know that he is the creator of the idea of Eco-Kosher. And it appears in many places, so hopefully this is absolutely right. But I just want to acknowledge that this is a non-check source by me. Okay. Who has a microphone? If you have a microphone, just
I've got a mic.
Go.
I invented the word eco-kosher to say that something is ecologically kosher. I give you an example of eco-kosher. The regular kosher way is about the dishes that mustn't be contaminated, etc. If I pick up a cup to have coffee, styrofoam would be the best thing to have. It hasn't been used before, and after I drink from it, I'll throw it away, and nobody else will use it. From the usual kosher place, that's the direction to go. But in comparison to that, what will happen to the planet by my drinking into styrofoam, I'd much rather make the other choice, eco-kosher.
So he says there's another layer. Kashrut, keeping kosher, is about developing that awareness that the Kli Yashar was speaking about to take care of the earth. It's not a unique truth. It's not that that's the only way to take care of the earth. That's the Jewish one. But if the ultimate idea is to take care of the earth, well, I need to be thinking about other layers of kosher. Can you go down? This is from an expert from an interview that was done to Rabbi Itz Greenberg. Now, an interesting thing is that we know that Heschel made the same determination, but he was a conservative Jew. This is an Orthodox Jew, a modern Orthodox. So it makes a big difference from that perspective. Who's going? Go.
In 1971, you were the only Orthodox rabbis to declare that non-union lettuce and grapes should be regarded as non-kosher, and you urged Jews to boycott them. What is the basis in Judaism for that position? Greenberg. We were both students of the
Let me stop you 1 second. He says, no, it's not me. He goes to the biggest Rebbe of Orthodox Judaism in the United States and says, that's not me. I'm a student of my Rebbe. So he's given that like a higher legitimacy when rabbis go back to a previous rabbi, to their teacher, and say, no, I'm just following the Torah of my teacher, saying that's what we are supposed to do. And this legitimacy is even bigger than my own person. It's the legitimacy of generations of interpretation. Keep going.
Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. From him, we learned the idea that halakha is not just a list of ritual do's and don'ts, but a comprehensive worldview that applies to everything that happens around us. The Torah prohibits the exploitation of workers. So why shouldn't that apply to migrant farm workers picking lettuce or grapes? They were being mistreated, so it was natural for us to apply the principle of non-exploitation to their situation too. It seems obvious.
Thank you. Any comment on this? So he's adding.
What is forbidden foods at all. It adds to it from a, whether you call it eco or behavioral perspective of respecting those that are being exploited, but I don't think it gives a proper explanation of why we have forbidden foods.
He's talking about why the grapes and the tomatoes, or the lettuce, sorry, the grapes and the tomatoes became later on forbidden. He's saying, talking about.
Distinguish between kosher and non-kosher grapes primarily because of the environment in which they were produced.
Well, he's saying that ethical kashrut is a real thing, and that the foundation for eating kosher is to develop an ethical vision of how to live our lives in the world. Yes, but have a microphone. You need to have a microphone, otherwise we are excluding the people in Zoom. And Zach, are you allowing people in Zoom to make comments? Or if anyone in Zoom that you want to jump in, just let us know, raise your hand and speak.
So I heard the different explanation for,
Go.
and I said it in Torah study, and I think it might be interesting. It actually comes from Chabad, and they're looking at the whole thing as what God wants from us. And he compares the relationship between God and us as a wife and husband. And for instance, you sit with your wife and you're watching TV, and your wife wants coffee, and she wants it in a very, very white, like with a lot of milk, and you telling her, well, but that doesn't make sense, it's just not coffee anymore. You put all these things in, but that's how she wants it. So you, as a person that really wants to satisfy her, you just do it the way she wants. You don't ask her why you want it with more milk. I think it's not good, so much milk. It's not eco, it's not this, it's not this. You want it this way, I give it to you this way. So they separating between, in the different laws of kashrut, they have 3 levels, and some of it is, they're just not explanation. That's how God wants it from us.
That's the difference between
how
Chukim
we
and
want it.
Mishpatim.
And so there's just different ways
So,
to look
so
at it.
we are probably, sure, there are things that, so correct, like there are things that you say, well, why this one and not the other one? Yes, we have formula from the Torah. But the point is that we don't stay in the formula. Jewish tradition never stays in the formula. As a matter of fact, we are a Talmudic tradition. Like we are a product of constant conversation, so it's Chabad. And I'll show you something from Chabad in a moment. Just to, or from one of the Hasidic masters, just to turn it once again. The idea of accepting laws the way they are, it works to some extent. But the question is there for the liberal Jew a real purpose on keeping kashrut, on having the idea of kashrut as a central value in Jewish tradition? And what I'm suggesting is that Jewish tradition, the idea of kosher eating, is not to fulfill a divine caprice. The idea of kosher eating is to fulfill the idea of taking care of the earth and taking care of the rest of humanity, not only of animals. And so let's see what Cardoso says. I need a fast reader.
There is little doubt that one of the functions of the kashrut laws is to protect the animal from pain even during the slaughtering. Still, we cannot deny that in our own slaughterhouses where proper shechita, thank you, is done, there have been serious violations of another law. Sa'at ba'ala.
Tsar Balei Chai, which is inflicting pain. We're going to cut it a little bit, Mark. I'm just losing an hour. So Cardoso will speak about inflicting pain in animals. So when you have the industry of meat, and you are trying to be very productive in your industrial work, and the most important thing behind your work is your profit, and in that work you forget to take care of the animals, you just, in a unmindful way, fulfill the laws of kosher shechita, he will say it's not enough. It's not enough, and I will play the argument that you will say that some of the kosher corporations in the United States are adopting now the laws of humanely raised meat. So you will start seeing in kosher levels, go to Trader Joe's. You will see that Empire, for example, has added that it's not only kosher, also humanely raised. Because real kashrut, will say Cardoso, was created in a context in which there was some relationship between the consumer and the animal. That relationship doesn't exist anymore, and what you get is a steak. And you don't care, not saying that you don't care, but our society doesn't think much about how that steak made its way to the groceries. I'm not advocating for everybody to become vegetarian, but I think that kashrut advocates, and some people will say that kashrut advocates ultimately for vegetarian eating, but I think that kashrut advocates for mindfulness. Advocates for saying, no, it's not only about the shechita, it's also about the life of this animal. What was the life of this chicken? What was the life of this cow? And what Cardoso, who is an Orthodox Jew, is bringing us a very strong criticism, is saying, our kosher corporations are not doing that work. They're not really kosher anymore. And you will see that there is a movement among Orthodox Jews that they began to be vegetarian because they don't trust the corporations. This Jew, for example, I buy, my gold standard is kosher and humanely raised. But then, second one is not kosher, it's humanly raised. Third one is kosher. But by that time, I already eaten vegetarian. This is my personal choice. What we're trying to say is that for the liberal Jew, kashrut is not a value in a world that has disconnected itself from where our natural resources are coming. Kashrut is not a value to disregard. Kashrut is a value to reclaim because we want to have a relationship with nature. You can have any interpretation of kashrut. From that perspective, I'm a Reform rabbi. I have my interpretation. I invite you to develop yours. But to disconnect ourselves from our plates, that's a terrible mistake. That's to disregard such a crucial Jewish value. And I want to give you, I see you, Elaine, give me one more text, and then we have more conversation. Kedushat Levi on Parashat Noach. Now, why Parashat Noach? Because Parashat Noach tells us that after the flood, we started to eat meat. So the argument is that before that, we were vegetarian. But Kedushat Levi is the Berdichev rabbi, okay? Like Chabadnik, 100%. Okay? Let's see what he says. The verse which states, take for yourself from all that is edible, is say in the language that implies one who feeds others. This is explained in the Midrash, which states, the woman that was given to me gave me fruit from the tree, and I ate. The past tense, I ate, was not used in the verse. The Midrash teaches a general rule that through eating, a Jew eats in the manner of fixing the flow of the first human being that was made through eating. This fixing is done by way of the mitzvot that Jews do when eating, which are blessings said of one's food, and other blessings said in regards to food before conception. Therefore, the reason why the verse says, I eat and not I ate, implies that an element of Adam's original eating continues to this day. Thus, through the consciousness of our eating, we can repair that which was flawed before. What? No, listen. No, they're together. No, they're together. There's the law and the reason for the law. Saying that the law, of course, there's a structure, there's a very specific and arbitrary way to that. But also Chabad will say it's not enough for us. We need to bring deeper meaning to this. And here's the Berdichev saying, no. When I commit myself, because eating kosher is not necessarily easy. Ask my children when we travel to places and I have them eating for 2 weeks vegetarian and they are carnivores, and say, well, there's no humanly raised or kosher here, and we eat vegetarian. Ask them, they feel it's a total sacrifice. It's not, we don't eat kosher only because that it's a rule. We're seeking for a connection, for a relationship with the world we live in. And Elaine, you want to say something, and then I want to read last text before
I do want to say
all those that are here kill me for running too long.
Is it working? Is it working? Working?
Yes, it's working.
Okay. It seems to me that I was understood that the highest level of kashrut is vegetarianism.
That's an argument that comes from Rabbi Cook.
Rabbi Cook. Okay. And then when we became more hunter-oriented, then we moved into eating the meat.
Yes.
And then when you talked about the restrictions that were put upon us, not just from kashrut, but many other things, to put limits on what we could and couldn't do. So the killing, we therefore had to kill the animal. We killed the animal, but there were certain restrictions about how that animal was to be killed and how it was to be prepared so that we could then eat it properly. Now, I have eaten at many homes that are kosher, and believe me, there is no connection between the values that you're talking about and their eating kashrut.
Correct.
There's a disconnect completely.
I understand.
Okay. I think it's just according, and some homes it's like some of my wonderful grandchildren, they don't just eat kashrut, it's kashrut according to this
To
rabbi.
this specific right. Can you want to give me a bottom line? Because I really want to be mindful and conclude, so give it to me.
Okay. For me personally,
Yes.
I have a sense that by observing kashrut, there is an awareness on my part that I do have a connection to me being Jewish. I am aware that when I eat a kosher meal in my home, that there is an awareness that I can't have somebody come and do potluck. That is a sacrifice. But that's my stand. When I go out, if it's meat, then I just eat vegetarian. It is a sacrifice, but that's a sacrifice that connects me to my identity as a Jew. And again, it's not that I'm connected to how I'm thinking the animal is being killed.
So
That's me.
let me piggyback in what you just said. Connection to my identity as a Jew, being a Yehudi, a Jew, is to be grateful. Yehudi comes from the word Odaya, Grateful for what? For the world that you were gifted. So there are rules, there are behaviors that help us express and exercise that gratitude and recognize that gratitude in our work. Daphne, I want to get back to you and something that you say, and I think you understand what I was referring to. What Elaine was saying, that what is this connection between meaning and action, is the Torah of Ishayahu Leibovich, who says, no, we are commanded to do things. This is what we are supposed to do. And doing those things is meaningful by itself. That's a vision that exists in Judaism, and it's a very important one. I think that within that vision, there's like an internal argument also that says it's not enough. And I think that's why I was saying about Shabbat. I'm saying that there's this idea that Shabbat, you will find it, that say, these are the rules, we follow it the way it is, and we don't question the formula. But there's an argument that says we need meaning to this mitzvot. We need like a deeper meaning, because otherwise I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I struggle with that. So I want to conclude with one idea that comes from Rabbi Sheila Peltz, Weinberg. Eating is the primary way that human beings interact with the rest of nature. We are composed of the same elements and compounds that make up our food. Indeed, when we eat, we transform a part of nature into energy that we can use for conscious purposes. The system of kashrut causes us to pause and consider that while we are part of nature, Daphne, going back to our conversation, we are endowed with a unique potential to make choices in the way we respond to life. And here's the bottom line.
Rabbi,
The bottom line is not.
I
Caroline?
would love to add to what the previous speaker just said. Eating dietary laws from different religious groups is a gut reaction. It's things that you were brought up with and what you were willing to give up if you decide not to follow completely, and what you decide to follow. And some of it doesn't make any sense at all. I had a wonderful conversation with a Hindu, a Muslim, and myself of what we would do at home, what we would do outside, and what we just don't do. I cannot eat meat and dairy together. I can have something in between in the same meal, but to eat meat and dairy together, and I would take the cheese off a hamburger and bite into the bun before I took the meat. I just couldn't do it together.
Caroline, can you hear me?
There was also
I need you to help me.
a
I need
historic
you to make a
distortion in what you just said, and I have to correct it. The United Farm Workers of America were running the boycott of lettuce and grapes.
What?
It wasn't union picking or non-union picking. They were the union pickers. It was basically out of California. New York State already banned the chemical I'm going to talk about. There was a chemical that in California they were still using.
Zach, help me, he cannot hear me. Caroline, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I love to hear the input, the historical
They
point,
were operating
but
out
I
of
was,
my
I
office.
was,
I know what was going on.
so I love to hear that, and if it's wrong, I'd love to be
And
corrected.
it was a health thing. It was a health thing because that chemical was creating birth defects and killing workers. New York State had banned that chemical, but California had not. And there was a passing the fast to demonstrate how important it is what you eat, and it was based on.
Caroline, I don't think you hear me. I can't. We barely can hear you, and I don't want to cut you. But I just said the bottom line, and then you started with this comment. So I'd love to hear your comment after the service. I will stay here, and you can share your comment with me. I'd love to hear that. But I want to get back to the bottom line because we are really running late, and I was finishing the conversation. The point that I want to leave all of you with is that kosher eating is not only kosher eating. It's a mindset that we try to bring to ourselves as we interact with the world, with nature, and with fellow human beings. And that It's not a value to disregard and to say, well, that's not how I exercise my Jewish identity, because a part of exercising our Jewish identity is being very mindful of how we want to interact with the world. The interaction that we have with the world in our tradition is called kashrut. Shabbat Shalom. Caroline, I will stay here to hear what you have to say. I promise it got very complicated with the sound. Amod.
Moshe Yerachmael ben Abraham, Hallelujah Arishon, Mitchell Goldberg, and reading will be Daphna Guterman.
Thank you.
Page 814, line 1.
What chapter?
Chapter 11, verse 1.
Okay, perfect.
Vayidabar.
Baruch hu et Adonai hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Habrach L'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hambarach le'olam v'oed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torto. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
אמן. וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון לאמור אליהם, דברו אל בני ישראל לאמור, זאת החיה אשר תאכלו מכל הבהמה אשר על הארץ, כל מפרסת פרסה ושוסת 16 פרסות מעלה גרה בבהמה, אותה תאכלו, אך את זה לא תאכלו, מעלה הגרה ומפריסי הפרסה, את הגמל, כי מעלה גרה הוא ופרסה איננו מפריס, טמא הוא לכם, ואת השפן, כי מעלה גרה הוא ופרסה לא יפריס, טמא הוא לכם, ואת הארנבת, כי מעלה הגרה היא ופרסה לא יפריסה, טמאה היא לכם, ואת החזיר, כי מפריס פרסה הוא, ושוסה 16 פרסה, ואוגרה לא ייגר, טמא הוא לכם, מבשרם לא תאכלו, ובנבלתם לא תיגעו, וטמאים לכם.
כוח.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach. Yam tov. Daniel Shalom ben Daniel. Aliyah Sheni. Daniel Santian, and reading will be Rabbi Miriam Ben Rall. We're still on page 814 at Tet. Second column.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamarach.
Baruch Adonai Avraham Ba'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamarach L'olam Ba'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher barhabanu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Et זה תאכלו מכל אשר במים כל אשר לא סנפיר וקשקשת במים, בימים ובנחלים אותם תאכלו, וכל אשר אין לו סנפיר וקשקשת, בימים ובנחלים, מכל שרץ המים, ומכל נפש החיה אשר במים, שקט הם לכם, ושקט יהיו לכם. מבשרים לא תאכלו, ואת נבלתם תשקצו. וכל אשר אין לו סנפיר וקשקשת במים, שקט הוא לכם.
ברכו אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נתן בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Yasher koach. Yam tu, Esther Bashabat, Avraham v'Yacha, Aliyah Shlishi, Elaine Asa, and reading will be Nitza Hennig.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam Vaed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
ואת אלה תשקצו מן העוף, לא יכלו שקץ הם את הנשר ואת הפרס ואת האוזנייה ואת הדאה ואת האייב למינה, את כל עורב למינו, ואת בת היענה ואת התחמס ואת השחף ואת הנץ למינהו, ואת הכוס ואת השלח ואת היען שוב, ואת התנשמת ואת הקעת ואת הרחם, ואת החסידה הענפה למינה, ואת הדוכיפת ואת העטלה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני
נותן התורה. We ask you now to rise for Agba and Lila of the first Torah. Danny, can I ask you to bring the second Torah? בסוד התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה על שלושה דברים על שלושה דברים על שלושה דברים העולם אתה יכול לשים אותה שם על שלושה דברים
על שלושה דברים על שלושה דברים העולם
עומד על התורה
ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים.
Okay, here we are, and
It's on page 1145 in the blue book. Numbers
no, this is not.
Numbers 19:1.
No, this is not Bara. Yes. Yes, so go ahead.
Yam tu. Title Rivka Bat Shmuel Velea Maftir, Lila Pesner, and reading will be Rabbi Nico Sokolovsky. Page 1145, it's Numbers 19:1. Yeah, I know some of the books are different.
But this is in Hebrew. Okay, Leila, I'll put it for you. Wait a second. So this is the blessing for the beginning of the Torah reading.
I'm used to using the thing, and I brought Belle up to show her what the Torah looks like.
Good that Bella is here. Here you go.
Baruch et Adonai Hambara.
Ba'ed.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'charabanu mikol hamim v'netanu et Torto Baruch atah Adonai
נותן התורה, אמן. וידבר אדוני אל משה ולאהרון לאמור, סוד חוקת התורה אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ביקחו אליך פרה אדומה תמימה, אשר אין בה מום, אשר לא עלה עליה עול, ונתתם אותה אל אלעזר הכהן, והוציא אותה אל מחוץ למחנה, ושחט אותה לפניו, ולקח אלעזר הכהן מהדמה באצבעו, ועשה אל נוכח פני עול המועד.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam betzolchenu.
ברוך אתה אדוני נותן הדור בסוד התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. And while the Torah is open, we say, משברך אבותינו ואימותינו, אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, רבקה, רחל ולאה, הוא יברך את החולים. I like to ask for your attention, 1 second. We take a moment to acknowledge, while the Torah is open, to acknowledge those that are in need of healing. Even when we're in a rush, we try not to forget the things that are important. So we think of those that are in need of healing. We think of this communal moment in which we are rushing into lunch or whatever is next because the talk got a bit longer. But there are things that we carry all week long, that we carry all the time. So we stop for a second and we recognize them. We think of all those that are dealing with illness. We think of those that are recovering from COVID, from surgery. It's a good opportunity once again to remind Gabriel, who is recovering from a surgery. We think of those affected by the terrible war in Ukraine, as Mark is reminding me. And we pray for the complete healing of their bodies and their souls. We pray for their רפואת הגוף and רפואת הנפש. In כל חולי עמו ישראל, with all the people of Israel and all the people of the world. And let us say,
Amen.
And we are grateful also for all those that came up to the Torah in honor of the Torah, Shabbat, and this wonderful community that we will together. Please remain standing. What? Tough one. עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכי המאושר. It is a tree of life for those who hold fast to it. And it is also a source of joy. We remember always that its ways, its paths are joyful paths, paths of nicehood, that Hey Noam. They are tracks of shalom, of peace. We ask, as we engage in the study of Torah, in the work of Torah, to be not only seekers of that peace, but also creators of that peace. We turn our student to page 588. ונאמר והיה אדוני מלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. You may be seated. Now take a moment to acknowledge mourners in our community. Zach, I would need for you to read the comments that we have on Facebook, on Zoom. We acknowledge those during the first 7 days of mourning Shiva, and those during the first 30 days of mourning Shloshim. And so those that are in the cycle of the first year of mourning. We also acknowledge those that have a yahrzeit this week, the anniversary of someone's passed by this time of the year, in years past. Do we have comment? Your cousin. Zach, do we have comments in Zoom? What you heard?
Randy Sostock, the first year.
We now turn our study to page 598 for Kaddish Avelim, Mourner's Kaddish. You can support our fellows by standing or sitting, joining us with your voices or your hearts. יתגדל ויתקדש שם רבה.
אמן.
בעלמא דברה חירותי, בימליך מלכותי, בחייכון ובמכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, באמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שווה לקודשה. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה עד אמינם בעלמה, באמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה, בחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, באמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, באמרו אמן. May the memories of your dear ones, of our dear ones, be always a blessing in your life. You may be seated. Shall we do a change, or shall we stick to the plan? Stick to the plan? Always. So we will conclude now talking about the Rambam. I was harsh with Rambam today. So still one of my most beloved Jewish thinkers. The Rambam, at some point in his discussions with fellow thinkers around the world, he thought that the way to create some stability was to express principles of Jewish faith. He wrote something called the 13 Ikarim, the 13 principles. Scholars say that he only believed the first 4, but he was trying to hit to the biggest public, so he wrote 13. And to be honest, Rambam for many, many years was rejected by fellow Jewish thinkers. He was challenging, very wise, but very challenging. And it took many years for him to become, he didn't see that in his life, the prominent thinker that we all refer to today. And for these 13 principles to be one day transformed into a poem, and to be sung in many synagogues around the world. The words of Igdal, they come from these 13 principles of the Rambam. So we are on page 628, trying to bring some love to the Rambam and to the history of Jewish people, and that's to say also that we are interconnected. The Rambam was from Spain and lived in Egypt, and this melody is from Greek. I learned it in Argentina, and we sing it in the United States. יגדל אלוהים חי והשתבח נמצא בהנהל אל מציאותו נמצא בהנהל אל מציאותו אחד בן יחיד כייחודו נעלם בגם אין סוף לאחדותו נעלם בגם אין סוף לאחדותו אין לו דמות הגוף בהינו גוף לא נערוך אליו קדושתו לא נערוך אליו קדושתו
כמו לכל דבר אשר נברא ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו ראשון ואין ראשית
לראשיתו אינו אדון עולם לכל נוצר יורה גדולתו ומלכותו יורה גדולתו ומלכותו
שפר נבואתו נתנו אל אנשי סגולתו
ותפארתו אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו איי לה 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 la 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 hey la 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 hey la 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 לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד נביא ומביא את אמונתו נביא ומביא את אמונתו לא ימיר דתו לעולמים לסולתו לעולמים לסולתו
צופה ויודע שרינו מביא לסוף דבר בקדמתו מביא לסוף דבר בקדמתו
אומר לאיש חסד כמפעלו נותן לרשע רע כרישתו נותן לרשע רע כרישתו ישלח לקץ ימין פדות עולם כל חי ויש יכיר ישועתו כל חי ויש יכיר ישועתו eternal life planted within us and gave us the blessing to recognize the wonders in our world. חיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך הריח שם תהילתו ברוך הריח שם תהילתו אדוני עוש לעמיו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום שבת שלום, שבת שלום ומבורך everyone. יאי, די, 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 די,